G'day guys, Paton here from KFC SuperCoach HQ. The dust has settled a little bit on what was a crazy season in 2023. So I'm just going to do a video to look back at what happened. Some things we may not want to remember, but it is always helpful to look back what we got right, what we got wrong, and what we can take forward to hopefully become better KFC SuperCoaches. And looking into next year, maybe some of these strategies and players that we'll look to maybe pick or avoid or trades, all those sorts of things. So hopefully it won't take too long, but should be an interesting little retrospective. And we can start with the final round, which I did actually put up a really good score, so I was happy with that. 1-1 grand final in the office against Dan Batten, so that's always a great way to finish the season. Ranked in the end 26.77, which I think that is a successful year in KFC SuperCoach. It's actually a slight improvement for me. I think I was, what was I last year? 3086. So jumped about 500 spots in the last round to get ahead of where I was last year. So you have to give that a tick. Not quite as high as I would have loved. Everyone, I think, gunning really for the top 1,000 is the elite area you want to be in, but that's still a pretty good result, especially considering this year we had 190,000 people playing KFC SuperCoach AFL Classic, which is just a fantastic number, fantastic result. So anyone who can get in the top $5,000, even 10K, you're doing really well. So the coaches who get, got some socks and some great prizes in the top 1,011 rankings, well played. And that's still what I'm aiming for next year. Hopefully I can get a pair of those KFC socks. But going to divide this into a few little sections. I'll just, let's have a quick look at how the team finished up. So I had to carry Nick Dacos on the bench for the last few rounds, as a lot of people did. Sam Banks played for me in the final round for the Tigers, came into the team. So at least I avoided a donut. Didn't go amazing. Kicked a goal, so we'll take that. Sicily, interesting, another big score. Would you pick him the start of next year after all the dramas this year? We know what he can do when he is on. We'll get to some of that discussion a little bit later. Harry Sheasel, incredible player of the year in KFC SuperCoach, and he's one I think I will consider next year if he's a defender, which he should be. So that's just incredible numbers that he was putting up that at the end of the year in his first season is pretty remarkable. Even someone like Nick Dacos that we really loved last year, how he flew home. He wasn't putting scores like this up. It's average 99.5. I think Dacos finished around 91. So just incredible numbers there from Harry Sheasel. I guess we might want to see where does he play as he moved into the midfield next year, which could happen as Dacos did. But as we saw with Nick, didn't really hurt his scoring too much. Nick Madden, captain for me in the final game. So that was fitting after carrying him the entire year as a bench donut who served a pretty good role for VC loops throughout the year. Always wanted to have that link to the forward line in case we needed ruck cover, and unbelievably, we never needed it, which I don't barely remember a season when that's happened. Last year, we made about 6 trades in the ruck. This year, I mean, I did make some ruck trades, which we will get to, but we never really had a Rowan Marshall, 1 week injury or suspension that we just had to find some cover for. So don't know if that's, every year is different. That's one of the biggest lessons. And, whether you would go into next year thinking, don't bother with ruck cover. Not sure if I'd quite go that far, but it was pretty amazing that the year finished that way. And of course, I put the VC on Taylor Walker. I've had him for about 6 weeks. It was really just hanging on to him for that final game against the Eagles, and he delivered with a 167. So can't complain about that. And taking that VC score certainly helped me. But a very cool feature that people will, I'm sure, mostly be aware of who play KFC SuperCoach is the history button up here. And that gives you a bit of a track on how you've gone all throughout the season with your round ranks and overall ranking. And actually, you can go back through various seasons up here too, which I was doing earlier, which is kind of a fun exercise to find out what my ranks have been. But anyway, this is what I was really looking for. Down here, the trade history. So you can look back at all the trades we made over the course of the season and which ones worked and which ones didn't, going all the way back to round 1. And there's some pretty scary names on there. So we'll have a bit of a think about who were some of the best and worst trades over the course of the year for my team, and really helped me get to where I ended up. After started round 1, I was ranked 66,000 after round 1, so did need to make up a bit of work, but climbed up to 4,000-ish around round 10 and pretty much hovered around there for the rest of the season. Now, talking about good trades, I traded Sam Doherty in round 5, which everyone had to do. Turned out to be not a great starting pick, but just went straight for the top, paid up for Jordan Dawson. We don't always want to grab guys at their best price, but I just couldn't see him getting cheap anytime soon. Brought him in, and I remember putting the VC on him in, I think it was a Thursday or Friday night game against Carlton, then he scored 152. So that was a great way to welcome him to my team, and he, of course, is one of the top defence scorers for the whole season. So I was rapt to get him in. Similarly, picking up some primos when they prices dropped. I got Jack Sinclair for $540,000 at round 8. I got Zach Merritt for $564,000 in round 10, and those guys just turned out to be fantastic scorers for the rest of the year. Lockie Neal similarly after the buys for the Lions, although he tapered off a little bit towards the end. And Tom Stewart was another great pick where I just he didn't get that cheap, $580K, but I just had my eye on him thinking before that buy that Geelong shared with Gold Coast. I really wanted to get him in and did that in round 11, and he was a fantastic scorer for me for the rest of the year. A couple of other trades which I was really happy with. One to shout out is in round 9 I traded Alwyn Davey. I think I remember this round. I really didn't have much to do. So I traded Alwyn Davey out, who's been sitting on my bench, not really getting a game, not scoring any points. He'd gone up to $212K, so we'd made about 70 or 80,000, which isn't great for a rookie. But Rory Atkins was sitting there at 203,000, and I was able to make that trade, make $7,000 or $8,000 on the deal. And then Atkins was fantastic for. I think he had one really bad score in Darwin, but generally through the bye period, he was really handy play to have in the back line. Could swing him to the midfield, and he was able to trade out and make a fair bit of cash off him at the end of the buy. So I mean that was a big one. We'll get to later this year, later on, about lessons from the season. But there are a lot of players around that price. I also picked up Kieran Briggs when he was about $250K. So I didn't get Bailey Humphrey. I didn't get Samson Ryan. But these guys who are around the 170 to 210, 220 mark, I didn't get Angus Sheldrick, but they proved to be really valuable pickups. And watching prices, even with the subs vest, some players, Bailey Humphrey's score prices came down. He started the year more expensive than that, had a few subs games, had some really low scores, and ended up, once he turned the corner, people jumped on and he delivered some fantastic scores. So that's something I'll definitely be watching out for next year. Now, when we talk about worst trades for the season, probably there weren't a heap that I just look back and think, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? I didn't judge the rookies that well. I mean, I think it was hard to do during that mid part of the season. There weren't a lot of great ones, but I picked up Harry Sharp, I picked up Sam Sturt, I picked up Blake Drury, which I know a lot of people did. He might have only played the one game when I got him too, and they all proved pretty much duds. They dropped virtually the next week and barely seen again for the rest of the year. I think Drury came back for the last round or two, maybe playing as the sub, but that sort of hurt me having those guys on the bench, especially when you had a Charlie Constable who wasn't getting a game. Campbell Chesser was barely scoring, and Matt Roberts from the Swans who got injured. So left me with some real issues finding bench cover. So again, we always reiterate trying to find the most reliable rookies who will play games. And I think that does go back to that point about you. Even I got a Marcus Windhager later in the year, and he was a great trade-in. Worth paying up a bit more to get the guys who have the more solid job security. I think that is a good lesson for this year, because you don't want to be stuck with 5-6 guys on the bench who aren't even playing, even if you do have to pay a little bit more money to get those more rock solid guys. Another trade, bad trades. Yeah. Now, look, Tom Green got injured and had to trade him out, and I thought Tuke Miller was an absolute bargain at $518K, and that just didn't really work out. I think he averaged about 90 in the run home, which is way under what I thought. I thought he could average 110 plus, knowing what he's done in the past. And then, of course, he managed to get himself suspended for a week as well for a squirrel grip on Dane Zorko of all things. So, he was really annoying me, I have to say, towards the end of the season too, not producing premium level scores that we know he can. But the Gold Coast midfield has changed a bit this year. For a few years, they've been just so solid with Tuke, Matty Rowell and Noah Anderson as their three at the centre bounce. This year, obviously, Stuart Dew gone. Stephen King came in. Tuke got injured, shook things up a bit. You bring in a Sam Flanders into the midfield. The mix really has changed. So it will be really interesting to see what Damien Hardwick does with that team and with that midfield. Obviously, plenty of talent to work with at the Giants. So that was sort of my best and worst trades for the year. Now, what's next on our agenda? We'll be looking at, I think, what we got right and wrong. So getting right, I think we need to give ourselves a pat on the back for picking guys like Rowan Marshall, Tim Taranto, Josh Dunkley, Connor Rosie at the start of the season. They were very popular selections and a lot of people had them, but tick for getting them because they were all fantastic picks. Rowan Marshall ended up being the second highest scoring ruck, even though some people in the middle of the year were thinking about trading him out because his scores weren't what we were hoping for. But, for I think it was about $500,000 at the start of the year. Fantastic selection. Another one that I was obviously very happy with was picking Marcus Bontempelli. I identified him early. I think he was in my very first team when the team picker opened, and it was basically there all preseason and started in round 1 as my number 1 midfielder. He was a bit underpriced after being a little bit injured last year, playing a little bit forward under Bevo, and this year obviously went to a whole new level as a number 1 scoring player in KFC SuperCoach. So I definitely got that one right. And Errol Goulden, which I do feel a little bit sorry for someone like the Phantom on this one, where he was going to pick Errol anyway. He just loves him. He saw a breakout coming. The rest of us were not quite so sure, but then he goes out and scores, I think it was about 190 in a preseason game against Carlton. And given the price, he just had to chuck him in our teams. And going back over his season, I don't think if he hadn't have done that, I'm not sure who or when we would have been able to get Errol Goulden, because his first 7 or 8 rounds were pretty good. He was averaging around 100. So if you had him, you would have been okay with that. But he's not someone you would have been rushing to bring in if you didn't pick him. Then I think round 7 and 8, he exploded with a couple of 150s and he didn't look back from there. So that would have been a huge point of difference for someone like the Phantom, who had just a rotten run of luck all year. But I was very happy to start with Goulden, and he ended the year, it's just one of the, pretty much a top 10 player in the AFL. I think he was just absolutely fantastic. And some of the rookies I did get right. I mean, starting with Ruben Jinby, starting with Darcy Wilmot, Connor McKenna, Oscar Baker even made a fair bit of cash and was a pretty handy bench scorer. Will Ashcroft was great. And actually, probably something I got right was hanging on to him longer than a lot of people did. Through the buys, he was good coverage, and he started scoring really well. He was averaging 100 in his last 3 or 4 games before, unfortunately, doing his knee. So it cost me a trade right at the end there. But again, another one we can maybe think about next year with those top few picks. We've seen it now with Sheasel, Dacos, Ashcroft. These guys can maybe keep going all the way through the year, whereas previously you always expect, maybe from the buys onwards, they taper off these teenagers in their first season at AFL. So that's something to consider when we're picking our teams for 2024. I mentioned Kieran Briggs. I mentioned Marcus Windhager. There are 2 other moves that I did get right, getting them both for pretty cheap prices, and scored me plenty of points, especially big Briggsy. Now, what did I get wrong? There was plenty to put on the list here. Now, what did we end up going with? Starting Nat Fyfe and Sam Flanders in my forward line. Big mistake. Last year the mid prices were so successful for us, and we got 6 or 7 of them who end up being keepers. Getting someone like Cornelio for 260 grand in the forward line. So we thought that was the ticket to success this year. And if you look back, there weren't a lot of really successful mid-price picks. I think Jacob Hopper was okay until he got injured. We traded him out, probably made us 100 grand. Will Setterfield was okay. Certainly if you started him, got a couple of big scores in round 1 and 2, especially round 1. And then people who all jumped on him, which was nearly everybody, his ownership went up about 40% going into round 3, including me. He was not bad, I guess, for the next 6 or 7 weeks, average 70 or 80. Not really that good. Again, made probably 90 grand, and then we trade him out again coming into the sort of upgrade season. So I don't know if you'd call that a success, maybe partial tick. I mean, Jack Siebel is the one who we can definitely give a big tick to, going back to that role in halfback, which we love. The big distributor, Seagull, in the back line there for the Kangaroos. He was fantastic at that. So I'll give him a big tick. But generally speaking, I don't think it was a year of mid-prices. So again, going to next year, what do we do? Do we go back? Was last year the correct lesson that we should pick them? Was this year the correct lesson that you should avoid them? Or is it really somewhere in the middle and you pretty much have to weigh up available? And I think that's where it lands. So it might maybe pick 1 or 2, but probably I think next year might be more of a guns and rookies approach, old school KFC SuperCoach, rather than trying to load up our team with all these mid-price picks. Now, Fyfe and Flanders both gone very early, and Flanders, of course, extremely frustrating because he came back into the team later in the year, went into the midfield, and that's why I picked him. I knew he could do. Probably didn't actually say no he was going to score that well, but I knew he could be a real top-line midfielder for them if he was given the opportunity, and he just wasn't in those first 2 or 3 rounds. So not great for me in KFC SuperCoach, but maybe one we could consider next year. Now, the other thing that I got wrong, which really hurt me for the whole season and probably cost me 1,000 spots in the rankings, is that I never had Tim English. At the start of the year, I thought injuries were a bit of a concern. I wanted to maybe get a bit of a pod in my ruck line. Started Rowan Marshall, was very happy with him, and I picked Sean Darcy. He was pretty poor the first 2 weeks. I know quite a bunch of people jumped off Darcy and got English in round 2 or 3 before his price got too out of control. And I decided to stick with Big Shrek. And for the next 5 or 6 weeks, they looked like a pretty good decision. Saving that trade, they were scoring similarly. But then the problem was when I think a lot of people who, if they didn't have English to start with, if they didn't get him in round 2, maybe they had Darcy Cameron. He got injured in round 3 or 4, and they swapped him to Tim English. So pretty much 70% of the competition, or it seemed like it, had Tim English, and I didn't. And then when Darcy went down, the timing actually was great to pick up Kieran Briggs, but that meant I carried him through to the rest of the year, and there was really no opportunity to get Tim English at any stage. And I think he was about 25 points short of Bontempelli as the number one scorer for the season, miles ahead of the next best ruck. So, in theory, you save the money and you can spend it and make up the points somewhere else. But just having someone who is so reliable, was a captain option most weeks as well, really cost me. So we'll get to next year shortly, but there'll be a big discussion. An obvious lesson will be just pick Team English next year in the ruck, but there's going to be some good ruck options. So we'll see. Now, my other one that I did not get right, I don't think, which is a lesson that we've talked about for years in KFC SuperCoach about picking key forwards, and I fell straight into that trap. In round 6, I traded Ruben Jinby to Tom Hawkins, who was all the way down at 400K. And the next week, he scored 184 against Essendon. I thought, this is just an absolute genius move. But what it really showed was that key forwards can be good picks, but you just have to be really smart about when you trade them in and when you trade them out. So I got Hawkins at a good time in terms of his scores. The next 2 or 3 weeks, he was scoring around the 90 mark in that one monster game against the Bombers. The thing was, I should have got off him then. He was went up to 581,000, so made 150 grand off the price that I paid for him, and I should have cashed him in. But I held on to him for another month probably, and it really is a lesson in how much prices can fluctuate, because his price sank all the way back down, and I end up, by the time I got rid of him, he was cheaper than what I paid for him. And I had to carry, there was a 35 in there, a couple of 50s, so some really average scores, and he lost all the money that he made. So, if you're going to grab one of those high scores from a key forward and maybe target the fixture, I think you have to be prepared to get off. And that's not always easy, because there's, other things that come up, or players that get injured, things you have to deal with, and sometimes you get stuck with these guys. So buyer beware for me on that one. And the thing I then went and did was, when I did eventually trade Hawkins, I traded him to Taylor Walker and just had myself in exactly the same situation. So I paid 480 grand for him, which I thought was good money. He'd scored at 200 a couple of weeks before. I told myself this isn't points chasing, because his break even was about negative 100. He was about to play North Melbourne in Adelaide, and I thought he could put up another monster score, make a quick 50, 100 grand, and then I'll get off him. And then, of course, what happened? Well, first of all, he didn't score that great against North. He only scored 70 odd, and he was scoring around that mark. And then I couldn't get off. I ended up carrying him all the way through to the end of the year. So in that time, he scored a really out of the box 150 against Port in the showdown, and then the big score in the final round, which I was able to VC him. So in the end, he averaged 94 in the 7 or 8 rounds that I had him, which isn't terrible, but it is that real roller coaster. And, you would rather have a midfield type player playing in the forward line, getting you more reliable numbers than someone like a Taylor Walker. So if you are going to target them, for me, watch this back, Al, before the start of next year. If you're going to pick someone like him, it maybe, target it to a certain fixture, and then, plan to get off 2 or 3 weeks later. So that's something that I definitely, I got some really good results out of it, and it definitely feels great when they score 180 or 170. But, there's some pretty rubbish scores in there as well. So not something that I'll probably try and do again next year. I just wanted to mention, too, some of the horrific luck that everybody copped this year. And, I didn't get it worse than anybody else, but did get my share of it. I mean, James Sicily, I don't know what we do with him. When picked him at the start of the year, his scoring was fantastic most of the season. Had a couple of weird low scores when he got some attention from someone like a Cooper Sharman. But generally, fantastic pick. But then he manages to get himself suspended twice, and both during the buys, which is unbelievable. So I traded him out and then made this whole plan to get him back in, which I did. But his scoring, again, was a bit of a roller coaster to end the season. So I'm not sure if I can go with Sicily again. And then probably the toughest one that I copped was Jordan Ridley. Was very frustrating. Brought him in after the buys as a sort of a cheap primo defender. He had some really good scores, but I had him for 4 weeks and he got injured in 2 of those games. And then I had to use my last trade on him, which my last trade was him and Ashcroft, which I brought in Luke Jackson and Tom Liberatore. So, you could say those moves actually worked out really well. Jackson scored great in the run home, and Libba was just such a good player to own. He was scoring so well. Wasn't in that many teams, but unfortunately, I only had him for 4 or 5 weeks, and one of those he copped a concussion against the Hawks, scored 20 points, and then he missed the next round. So it didn't work out too great. And the biggest lesson, which we move into the lessons from the season, that I think everyone talks about the trades. Do we try and hang on to trades? This year we all played super aggressive and burn all our boosts early. because that's what worked last year. And then we were left floundering because there were so many injuries towards the end of the year. And I ended up using my last one in round 20. And I think I actually held on to mine probably longer than some other people. But that I don't remember ever running out that early. I mean, maybe with 1 or 2 rounds to go, but usually try and hang on to a couple for finals at least. But so what do we do next year? That's the big strategy question. I think that we'll get a lot of discussion over the summer and heading into next season. Probably, the obvious answer is just keep trades. Don't go so hard. But it's so hard to resist the urge when the trades are there. You feel like you've got plenty sitting in the bank, and it's always, well, why don't I just use it now? Why would I hang on to a boost, for example, when I may not need it? I can use it now, gain an advantage, and then hope, that things work out in the long run. The one thing I noticed when examining my ranks over the course of the year, and I think this has been true for the last couple of years and other people I've heard discuss have had a similar experience, is that you can really make ground in the first half of the season. But once it gets past the buys, say, it's very difficult. Like I probably got to $4,000 overall coming into the buys and thought now I can really make my move and get up into the top ranks. And I made maybe 500 or 1,000 spots between there and the rest of the season. So probably I think the lesson from that in terms of the trade strategy that we're just talking about is to go hard early, use the boosts, try and upgrade your team as quickly as you can, but ideally maybe then try and pump the brakes a little bit and have a few left for the second half of the year, because you could really make a jump. I think one reason I did quite well in the last round was because I dodged some bullets and other players had people out who they couldn't replace. So I got a bit of an advantage. And if you had a trade and you're able to trade Nick Dacos, for example, this year, that would have gained you, I reckon, heaps of spots in the ranks, and, certainly in leagues as well would have been a huge advantage coming home. So I think that might be something I'll try and employ next year. Always difficult to do things on the fly, but maybe, try and be aggressive early with the trades, but coming into the buys, think about, look at how many I might have going through to the rest of the year. And looking at the buys, probably that will be something that I will try and look at earlier. Always something that's easy to just dismiss and think it's much later in the year. But this year, we really could tell a long way out that round 15 was going to be the most problematic round. You can't predict James Sicily's going to get suspended, things like that. So calculating the numbers can only get you so far, but I think it's certainly something to keep in mind. I know I brought in, might have been a Jack Sinclair or a player like that in round 6 or 7 when I thought, the price was too good. It probably doesn't work really well for my buys, but I'm just going to grab him anyway. And then later on, maybe I would have been better off waiting. You always have to weigh those up, because if a player's there at a bargain price, sometimes it is best just to get the timing right and grab them. But buys are something that easy to ignore early in the year, but I think can pay off if we can maybe give them a little bit more love. And the other lesson that I think I will try and take in, which is not something I've worried about too much in the past, excuse me, but I know some players are big on this, is starting guys over 700,000 and really at the top end of the price bracket. So this year I had it was all preseason was tossing up between Oliver and Laird. At one stage I had both of them and ended up going into the season with Rory Laird and no Clayton Oliver. And obviously Laird was the most expensive player in the game and he bombed completely in round 1. Ended up being a pretty reasonable pick. I wouldn't say it was a failure at the end of the year, averaged about 115, but could have got him for a lot cheaper later in the season. And that was the case for most players at the top end of the price bracket. I mean, if you started with Clayton Oliver, you probably wouldn't have been complaining the scores he was putting out until that horror injury that people had to deal with, which that's something that fortunately I was able to dodge. But apart from him, if you think the top-end midfielders at the start of this year were Lachie Neale, 676,000, Tuke Miller, 662, Callum Mills, 642. They all came way down in price, and either you decide I'm not really going to pick them, or you can grab them way cheaper. In defence, I remember there were 5 players over 600 grand, and I was thinking, I want to start all of these guys. How do I pick as many of them as I possibly can? And I ended up going with Doherty and Sicily. Doherty definitely didn't work out. Sicily probably did. Sinclair was the most expensive defender. He got a lot cheaper. Tom Stewart came down a little bit, got injured early in the year, and Dawson was probably the one we should have picked. So I think there's a lesson there in terms of picking those real top-end guys, and I might try and save the cash a little bit. And that really gets into the next topic of players who will pick in 2024. And I think there really is a changing of the guard in KFC SuperCoach. Guys like Lachie Neale, maybe a Jack Macrae, are dropping off, who have been so reliable for the last 5 years or so. Macrae definitely had a drop off this year. And Neale still averaged 110, but I don't think he's the uber primo that he has been. But then you've got guys who are really coming up, taking the next step. So Tom Green was a really good pick this year, and I think he'll be go to another level again next year. And then you've got players who were mid forwards this year who will be mid only next year, and there'll be a good question. Often that means they get ignored, but someone like an Errol Goulden, Zach Butters, definitely players that we're going to have to consider, even if they're midfield only. They won't be hopefully 650k, but they won't be cheap. But I think they're the guys who are ready to take over as the next top end KFC SuperCoach primos, and especially in the midfield. So I'll be definitely looking at them. Goulden will be very tempting. Butters as well. We know what his ceiling is like. I mentioned Sam Flanders earlier. If he retains forward status, that's going to be really touch and go, I think. He definitely had it, going into the last, month of the year. We did some calculations then, and he was on about 45% forward time or something, but he pretty much played exclusively midfield from then on. So we'll wait and see what Champion Data does with those numbers, and if he's a mid only, it's going to be a bit tricky. But if he's in the forward line, I think he'll be one definitely to look at. As I said, we'll watch Gold Coast in the preseason, see what Damon Hardwick does with all those midfielders and where Sam Flanders fits into the picture. But you think, given the way he finished the year, he'll be right up there. We always look for players who are moving clubs, who coming back from injury, who can present value. Brody Grundy's an obvious one. I mean, the last couple of days we've had some big movements potentially in the ruck around the competition. You always get that ruck merry-go-round. Looks like Grundy will go to Sydney. If he's the number one ruckman there, we saw what he scored when he was rucking without Gawn at the D's, which didn't happen that often, but for about a month, he was back to his 115, 120 averages. So if he's number one ruck at Sydney, I think he can go back to that, and he won't be expensive at all. So he'll be very tempting. I mean, then you've got Gawn. If Grundy's not there, Gawn all of a sudden is solo ruck again. So, and he won't be as expensive as he has been in the past. So we'll definitely have to look at him, although his age getting on a little bit, but, this is Max Gawn. We know what he can do. Can score like pretty much no one else in KFC SuperCoach. Then Jordan Sweet is really interesting. So he's been the backup man at the Bulldogs for a couple of years. Couldn't get a game this year with Tim English, so dominant. And now he's saying he wants to get a trade to Port Adelaide. So you'd think, especially if Scott Lycett doesn't hang around, Jordan Sweet will all of a sudden be the number one ruckman at Port Adelaide, and he'll be virtually, rookie priced or extremely, extremely cheap. So he'll be someone you'll definitely be thinking about starting, certainly on the bench or maybe even on the field. If he's number one ruck, and his VFL numbers were really good this year, he could average 100 or close to it, like a Samson Ryan or a Briggs this year in patches, and at the price, that's going to be really hard to ignore. And then, of course, you've got English. So, my thinking earlier is, how did I go a whole year without picking Tim English? Idiot, don't do that again. Will I be able to pick him next year when we have all these great options? Maybe we need to bring back the old R4 position where you could pick a fourth ruckman, because I think there's going to be some really great picks next year. Other injury players who will be heavily discounted, Tom Lynch at the Tigers, if they can get his foot right, he could be under 300,000. And we saw at the start of this year, as much as I said about key forwards, it is about the timing. And if you started with Ben King even, Charlie Curnow did it last year. We saw Joe Danaher. They can actually be really good money makers. You do have to ride the roller coaster, some big scores and some pretty poor ones, but they do tend to make a bit of money. And we know what Lynch is capable of. It'll be really interesting to see what the Tigers do next year, given the few changes in the list. But, he was just a whisker behind Charlie Curnow in the Coleman medal last year. So he's definitely one I'll be looking at. And Cam Guthrie, pretty much a forgotten man at Geelong, only played, I think, 4 games for the year, has averaged about 113 in the past in KFC SuperCoach. That was a couple of years ago. Probably wouldn't expect him to get back to those numbers, but if he's cheap, he could definitely be a Jacob Hopper style, 85, 95 averager for 7 or 8 weeks, make a bit of money, and then cash him into a top primo. So there's a few cheapish guys I'll be looking at. And in terms of breakout players, one that I really loved, and I wanted to pick him a couple of times this year in defence and didn't quite do it, but Nazia Wanganeen-Miller, I really love the way he plays. He finished the season really strongly. We always like to look at breakouts who had really good averages in the second half of the year. I have to go back and do the numbers on him. Probably should have done that before doing this video, but I will go away and do it before we get really into the preseason, because I think they'll show he averaged close to 100, and the Saints love the way he uses the ball off halfback. A beautiful user, and he'll be in his 3rd season, I think, so should take another step forward. So he's one I'll definitely look at. He was midfield defence eligible this year. Not sure if we'll get that next year. We'll be definitely one to watch in the preseason. And to finish off, who we won't be picking next year, I'm not really one of big on having burn lists of players, never again, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, Nat Fyfe is someone who we thought we wouldn't pick again. Then I somehow picked him twice on 2 different occasions this year and had to trade him out both times. I don't think I could pick him next year. But what if he comes in at 175k at the start of the year and looks great in the preseason? It'd be pretty tempting to whack him on your bench, but I'd say it's probably unlikely given his injury history, which totally bore itself out this year. Sean Darcy, another one. I mean, I mentioned all those great ruck options. Just can't see where he would fit in, especially if he's still sharing ruck time with Luke Jackson, who's really coming on at the Dockers, and given all his injuries, which again came back to bite us this year, can't see me considering him in the ruck. A couple of guys who were really good picks this year, Taranto and Stephen Canelio, presented value. They were forwards. They won't be next year. They'll be mid-only. They won't be that cheap. Just can't see myself picking those guys again, although I love what Taranto did in his first year at the Tigers. And the one player I definitely will not be picking, we talk about burn list, Tom Hawkins. He was fun to own for a couple of weeks this year. He was pretty painful to own for about 6 or 7 weeks this year, and I don't think I'll be picking him again. Not sure where Geelong's going to be at next year. They might try and play a few more kids, and I'm sure Tommy will still find a way to kick his 40, 50 goals. But, part of the reason I picked him this year is because, I thought he always ends up averaging 90 and being one of the top forwards, but didn't get there this year. I don't think that's going to happen again. He's definitely on the wrong side of 30. The forward line, though, will be super interesting when you get Canelio, Taranto, Dunkley, Rosie, Goulden. They'll all be mid-only next year. So I think the top 6 forwards from this year will all be mid-only. So who will we pick in the forward line? I think that's going to be really one of the fun discussions for KFC SuperCoach 2024. There'll be lots of interesting options where we can set our team apart, and maybe, we pick a Tom Lynch and we pick some key forwards. Charlie Kerner was a great pick in the end this year. So as much as I've gone on about not picking key forwards, we might have to revisit that discussion. But until then, I think it's a good exercise if you get the chance to go back and, look at that trade history. What did you do? Some of the fun memories of what's been a pretty wild ride this KFC SuperCoach. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for playing. Now, I've got the SuperCoach NBL hat on here. So if you haven't picked a team, jump in. That starts just before the AFL Grand Final. But great prizes. You can win a car, which is fantastic. It's now the official fantasy game of the NBL SuperCoach. So I really don't know anything about basketball, but I'm going to jump in and pick a team. And then, of course, we have SuperCoach NBL, which I know the Phantom and Tim Mitchell and Dan Batten are already talking about. There was another big signing yesterday, so we'll be getting into that over summer as well. And the team picker for KFC SuperCoach AFL, not that far away. We'll get through trades. We'll get through draft. I'm sure there'll be plenty of SuperCoach talk through there about who we need to look at. And certainly the Phantom and Dan love their draft, so they'll be helping us out with that. And then before you know it, the team picker will be open and we'll be starting to pick our teams for 2024. But before then, I think we're allowed to have a little bit of a breather. I think I like BBL SuperCoach, and I'm going to enjoy, I think, NBL SuperCoach as something I don't maybe take as seriously as the AFL. Just a bit of a fun game, and then we get into the serious stuff in December. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks for being part of KFC SuperCoach this year. As I said, it's been pretty crazy. Can't wait for what 2024 is going to hold.